Frank Sinatra may have gained fame as a singer, earning him the nickname the Chairman of the Board, but he also made a career of acting on both stage and screen, and maybe a bit of a role in gangster affairs, which might be why he hated The Godfather so much. Seriously? The Godfather, which premiered over 50 years ago, is considered a classic gangster film. It's based on the best-selling novel of the same name by Mario Puzo and directed by Francis Ford Coppola. This movie, of course, told the story of an immigrant family that crashed the dance of the American dream. That might not be the only story The Godfather told, however. A slightly more in-depth exploration shows that one of the movie's characters in particular may have just been something less than a tribute to Frank Sinatra himself. The character in question is none other than Johnny Fontane, who pays homage to his benefactor Don Vito Corleone. Fontaine is a singer who desperately needs the help of the Corleone family to get a music contract. Johnny Fontane, however, quickly attracted the attention of many people associated with Sinatra, and not just because of his name. The similarities between Fontaine and Sinatra were so obvious, according to many, that Sinatra became quickly infuriated. While the author himself maintained that the character wasn't based on Sinatra, there remains in the records an interesting note that Puzo wouldn't allow Frank Sinatra's lawyers to view the manuscript while it was being written. Although Puzo said that his character of Johnny Fontane was a composite of a few real-life singers, such as Al Martino, it seemed obvious to Sinatra that this just wasn't the case. Instead, he believed this character was directly based on him. Sinatra believed this largely due to the similarities between himself and the character of Johnny Fontane, which included, but weren't limited to, his family ties and associations. In Puzo's novel, Johnny was raised in Little Italy, and his godfather Vito Corleone had friends who owned venues to perform. Though this might not explicitly seem connected to Frank Sinatra, the fact that Corleone's connections helped Johnny Fontane get started as a singer was the first clue in Sinatra's mind that the character was heavily based on him. And with Frank's uncle, Bob Garavante, being part of the Genovese family, it's easy to see how that specific aspect would be referenced in Puzo's novel and eventually make its way into the film as well. And with the Corleone compound wedding scene seeming as if it were based on the real-life wedding of underboss Willie Moretti, with Sinatra once again as a performer, it makes sense how Sinatra could have seen this specific character as much more than just a tribute. Beyond the similarities that the character of Johnny Fontane had to Sinatra, there were rumors going around at the time that Sinatra himself had ties with the mob, and in some cases used these ties to great effect. At the time of its release, there were rumors of Sinatra having mob connections that allowed him to make certain moves in his career. It was even alleged that Sinatra got out of a contract with Tommy Dorsey, his band leader, in 1951 through the threat of violence by a mob. This was similar to how Johnny's career was helped by his connections to the Corleone family. And even more interesting, both Sinatra and Johnny Fontane starred in a movie in their later career. That, of course, wasn't enough for Sinatra. His mind was already made up, and it might have been for good reason. Francis Ford Coppola, the director of the movie, even went on to state that Johnny was inspired by a kind of a Frank Sinatra character. This wasn't, however, the only reason that Sinatra hated The Godfather. As reasons continued to grow for Sinatra to dislike the film, his displeasure grew with the entire ordeal until it led to a confrontation between Mario Puzo and Sinatra himself. According to Mario Puzo, he and Al Rudy were in a restaurant in Los Angeles when someone wanted to introduce him to Sinatra. Mario, who was a big fan of Sinatra, was looking forward to the meeting, and it went about as well as you'd expect. Though it's still unclear whether Mario Puzo himself meant any harm by the creation of the character, Sinatra had plenty of time to grow angry by the time the meeting between these two men took place. And it didn't go well. Rudy later stated that Mario wanted to ask for an autograph, but Sinatra was furious and reportedly said, "I ought to break your legs. Did the FBI help you with your book?" Mario later added, "What hurt was that here he was, an Italian from the north, threatening me, an Italian from the south, with physical violence. This was roughly the equivalent of Einstein pulling a knife on Al Capone. It just wasn't done." It's abundantly clear why Frank Sinatra would have hated The Godfather. He genuinely felt as if the film was based on him and his connections to the mob. It's easy to see how this could have felt like a personal attack, though it seems like Mario Puzo meant no such thing. And he made that clear to Mario Puzo until, according to Puzo, finally, I walked away and out of the restaurant. My humiliation must have showed because he yelled after me, "Choke! Go ahead and choke." Talk about adding insult to injury. Frank Sinatra clearly didn't want anything to do with The Godfather, which was the last thing Mario Puzo and Francis Ford Coppola wanted. This is especially true considering that at the time Frank Sinatra allegedly held enough power with the mob to ensure that no mafia film was made without his blessings. Although there's no real confirmation of this, it does seem as if Sinatra used his influence to try to keep Al Martino from taking the role of Johnny Fontane in The Godfather. And with Sinatra's power in both Hollywood and the mafia, this would have been a huge loss for the film. And while Sinatra didn't succeed in stopping Al Martino from playing Johnny Fontane, he still had a hand in the character. Things were allegedly carefully changed in the film, and even the manuscript of the book, in order to keep Sinatra and his lawyers as happy as possible. Frank Sinatra couldn't be bothered to ask Puzo if the connections between his character and Sinatra were chance. But whether or not the character of Johnny Fontane was based on Frank Sinatra, there are definitely parallels between these two figures. These parallels were intentional or not, but they're definitely interesting to consider. Do you think these connections are chance? To begin with, both Johnny Fontane and Sinatra started their careers off in a band. Fontane was, of course, in the Corleone Band, and Sinatra was a member of the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra. And although this was just the start, plenty of parallels were to follow. Both Sinatra and Fontane got out of the contract with their band, with some help allegedly on Sinatra's part, and both of them had real-life friends in the mob who helped them with their careers. After their time in a band, they went on to have successful solo careers as well. The key parallel was the voices of both these men. With Johnny Fontane's voice becoming weak and Sinatra's vocal cords being damaged, both of these men almost didn't make it as singers. And just as mentioned before, both of these men went on to play in a film in the later part of their careers. So what do you think? Connection or coincidence? Frank Sinatra is one of the most famous and successful musicians of all time. He was a man who knew what he wanted. He fought to make sure he got it. This is probably one of the reasons why Sinatra did not take too kindly to The Godfather, a film he saw as a mobster version of his life story. With the character of Johnny Fontane being so similar to Sinatra in both his career and his connections, it's easy to see how Sinatra could have felt as if this character was a direct attack. Whether it was or not might never be known, but it's definitely an interesting theory. But what do you think? Is Johnny Fontane a character clearly inspired by the life and alleged mafia ties of Frank Sinatra? Or is he a completely distinct character that just so happens to be similar to the famous singer? Go ahead, let us know in the comments below. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next video.